We're at Concordia Summit, and I'm with Nicole Goldin. She is the Director of Youth Prosperity and Security Initiative at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Hello. That's a long title that you have.
It's a long title.
How do you introduce yourself when you go out?
It's a bit of a mouthful, and I'm working on the right acronym.
Excellent.
Especially in Washington, everything is about the acronym.
For sure, for sure. So tell us about the mission of the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Great. So CSIS, that's the acronym
there
part.
you go.
That's the part that works. Is an independent, bipartisan think tank in Washington that's really at the forefront of thought leadership when it comes to foreign policy, global security, and issues. And the initiative that I'm leading on youth issues is connected to our project on prosperity and development, which is really looking at partnerships in promoting global development and prosperity. So it's really exciting.
And obviously, public-private partnerships is a huge theme and topic today. Can you talk about any partnerships right now that you're engaging in that have been very effective for addressing youth issues?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, the initiative that I'm leading, which we created in January, is in itself a partnership, which is really exciting. Yeah. It's a partnership between CSIS and the International Youth Foundation, which is headquartered in Baltimore. It's one of the largest NGOs that are doing youth development worldwide. And that's just a successful example of the NGO community really partnering with the think tank community to drive the policy agenda. But outside of that, and IYF is in a number of public-private partnerships and P3s to build youth empowerment globally. One, for example, that they launched recently that I've been affiliated with or associated with is called the NEO, the New Economic Opportunities Platform, which was launched in Latin America to build the employment readiness skills of thousands, if not millions, of young people in partnership with corporations like CEMEX in Mexico to really try and start to address some of those youth unemployment and youth employability issues.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's everybody's talked about just how critical having the three sectors with civil society and private public sector to come together. Has there been a difference in you going from public sector and now to a think tank? I mean, has there any thoughts on the transition?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been really exciting. And when I was in government, I was on the policy side as opposed to the programmatic side. But we were developing, for example, the agency's first ever policy on youth and development. And so in putting that together, we really had to engage all of our different implementing partners as well as our thought partners to learn from each other and to bring that to bear. And I think now, being at the think tank, being on the outside, we have the ability to start helping think through that learning agenda a little bit more and really understand that and help push that policy agenda to help us get to scale. So I think it's really a balance of both.
Yeah, and it just must come in so handy that how the government thinks.
How the other half lives,
Exactly. So if you were to look at global youth issues and 40%, a global 40% of the global youth face unemployment, and how would you break down when you're tackling these issues? Is there like sort of buckets of categories that are on the top of your agenda?
It's such a great question.
What are those categories?
What are those categories? It's such a great question. I mean, we always say youth are so complex, right? There's so much going on, and I often say I feel like youth are often...
Where do you begin?
They're all too easily, and that's why I think all too easily they're sort of marginalized by their complexity. It sounds a bit wonky, but it is. Where do you begin? And so obviously there's a big focus on the economic piece of it, and whether that's financial inclusion, whether that is the employment creation, the making sure they have good jobs and better jobs, entrepreneurship, and advancing that. But what we know about young people is that it's all linked. And so we want to make sure that young people are also engaging civically and politically, because there's a huge link between that just participation in society and really leveraging the assets of young people. One of our main research projects at the initiative is to we're developing a global youth well-being index, which will be the first of its kind to really tap the pulse and give us a picture of how young people are doing on a national level in a comparative way that looks at health and education and their overall environment of safety and security and economic opportunity, to really bring that together. And ICT is key. We want to think about young people today and tomorrow. We need to be understanding how they're interacting with all of these amazing tools that we have.
I mean, that's incredible. So obviously, the youth is so engaged right now in technology and, and social media, and just having worked on, youth issues for so long, how has social media or technology sort of changed the face of your work?
It's a great question, and I think it's given young people much more of a voice. I think they've been able to be much more participatory in whether it's policy talk or whether it's just driving the innovation. Look at Facebook, right? Youth-led, right? And there's for every Facebook there's an African example, or so on and so forth. So I think it's just really changed the game. Yeah. And again, to this point about scale, I think as we start to see more programs, technology has really enabled us to move faster towards scale and reach more young people than we've been able to before.
Right, and also in terms of you communicating and reaching them.
Absolutely.
It's sort of a two-way street.
Absolutely, and to each other.
Yes.
So it's really exciting, and of course there's a dark side to ICT, but I think the opportunity is huge. Yeah,
totally. And so I know you sit on the board of our friend Tammy Tibbetts' nonprofit organization. She's the first, and so any trends in girls, and investment in girls, and that becoming a more popular topic.
Absolutely,
I'm seeing that on my side of in the industry.
Absolutely, it's a great question, and I'm hugely excited and honored to be on the board of She's the First, an organization doing great things to educate girls in the developing world, but also to engage young men and women in this country and the millennials in this country in that effort. But on the sort of global scale, I think that we are seeing an increase in trends and investing in girls, which is great. Yeah. I think one of the things we need to do is know more about girls and sort of boys and what's working. And one of the biggest trends though that I see is the recognition, I think positively so, that we need to be investing in girls because they are often in some places and in some ways at a significant disadvantage, but we can't do that to the exclusion of boys or their fathers or their brothers or their uncles. So it's really about promoting sort of gender equality among young people, and in many cases that is about sort of lifting girls up, but doing that in a way that brings their brothers, like I said, and sort of the men and boys in their lives along.
And I think that the more women that are that are being educated, or young girls that are being educated and in working and developing professionally, I think it also changes how young boys, of course, respect women and view their roles in society.
Absolutely,
huge piece of it.
Absolutely. I mean, the more that we empower, whether it's economically or in terms of health, young women, education. I mean, they're not only changing their households, but they're changing. And that's sort of first and foremost to just have a better life for themselves, which is hugely important, but how it affects their communities and their countries, and it's really exciting to see.
I think we're good. Is there anything else that you want to share about what you're working on right now, or what you are super excited about? And
I just think what I'm super excited about is to see things like this, to see Concordia dedicating a day to understanding how we can promote public-private partnerships and P3s specifically to empower and engage and lift up the young people of the world. The largest generation in human history. There's so much opportunity, and that's, I think, what I'm excited about, is focusing on that opportunity, recognizing their challenges, and just bringing all these like minds and willing people together to bring us all forward.
I think the most important thing is the connection, right?
Absolutely.
And it's, obviously how does the private sector approach governments and vice versa, and how do social entrepreneurs and young people get involved? And I know just too, as a social entrepreneur myself, women's media, leadership media company, I often think, God, to push my mission forward, I have to engage, how do I engage the government? How do I engage large corporations to sponsor and fund what I'm doing? And it's intimidating.
It is.
Do you have any advice for young social entrepreneurs when it comes to youth, or in terms of seeing the ones that are really pushing their agenda through or being successful?
That's a great question. I think, one thing I will say when it comes to sort of engaging, whether it's a donor like USAID or a government, and this is something we're thinking about with this index, why we're doing it, is data and evidence. And in this evidence in this world, and sort of a big data, right? Bring it to the table, because increasingly investors want to invest in results, and it's part and parcel of having more data and doing more evaluations and all of that. But I mean, that's the one thing.
That's a huge point.
Yeah.
Do your research.
Do your research.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being
It was a real
here.
pleasure.
This is super fun. Thank you.
Excellent.